Ever had me teach leadership? You know that my heart cringes not just for our world today, but particularly for tomorrow. My passion for raising authentic and visionary leaders is undeniable in all that I do. I remember 2 years ago when I first spoke about the concept of my book, The Leadership Guardian, with one of my mentors. She asked, "What do you want people to feel after reading the book?" My answer was very clear. I want the readers to be sober, become more aware of their awesomeness, and be ignited for 360 degrees transformation in every area of their life. The reviews from the independent readers of the Leadership Guardian has been overwhelming. The Leadership Guardian is truly a transformational movement for those who are tired of mediocrity and are ready to lead a 360-degree transformation in their lives. While I cannot wait for this book to grace your shelf, I most importantly cannot wait for the Leadership Guardian to grace your heart. Get your copy today.
Hello, super leaders. Thank you for joining us again on Leadership Chats with Top Business Leaders. My name is Kemi Ogunkoya. I am a leadership development strategist, management consultant, and author of the Leadership Guardian. And I equip business leaders to develop the right competence to perform effectively in their current roles and seamlessly take on higher positions. And it is absolutely nice to have you here again. This series focuses on conversations around the elements of the Dawson model, a leadership framework that I developed, which consists of 12 key elements for effective and visionary leadership. And they include clarity, connection, character, confidence, consequence, community, consideration, critical thinking, communication, competence, commitment, and consistency. And I bring to you top leaders to talk about each of these elements and how you can interact with them for your personal and professional growth. And my guest today is Barry Moline, and we shall examine leadership and connection, how you can build the right connection with those you lead. And I have no doubt that this will be yet another transformational event. So let's meet Barry. Barry Moline is Executive Director of California Municipal Utilities Association, where he has served since January 2017. He represents California Municipal Electric and Water Utilities, working with a staff of professionals providing advocacy, information, and connection to more than 40 energies and 40 water agencies across the state. Mr. Moline has worked in the energy industry since 1980s, and he's represented the Florida Municipal Electric Association from 1996 to 2016. He is absolutely amazing. He has done oil and natural gas research for the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Fossil Fuels, investigated renewable energy and energy efficiency for the United States Department of Energy Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and has served on the U.S. Peace Corps. And in the electric utility industry, Mr. Moline has handled most issues related to electric utilities, including all forms of power supplies, energy delivery, and consumer services. He is a national expert in the purchase and sales of electric utility assets. With 25 years plus years as CEO, Barry has done great in the area of management and leadership, and he recently wrote a book called Connect, where he divulges secrets to quickly building great teams. Mr. Moline has a bachelor's degree from the University of Illinois and a master's degree from Washington University in engineering and policy. And on a lighter note, Mr. Moline is a longtime hockey enthusiast. He previously refereed games for the National Hockey League and still plays hockey and referees today, although at a slightly slower pace. And today we will be talking about leadership and connection. And I am absolutely excited and delighted to have Barry in the house with me. Hello, Barry. How are you doing? All right. So your audio is muted.
I see that, and now it's not. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Kemi, it's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Wow. So I have been looking forward to having this conversation and connection. Thank you for connect. It's an absolutely amazing and phenomenal book. Thank you for putting this together. I read this book and quite a lot of things really stood out for me. One was the ease with which you transitioned through a lot of areas that we find very difficult to deal with, but then you were able to present these areas, which is absolutely essential to human existence in such a way that is highly relatable. And then, you're able to talk about issues that ordinarily just weigh us down, but then with so much ease and with so much grace. So thank you so much for this.
It's a pleasure. I tell a lot of stories in the book because one of the things that I learned in the writing of the book was that it's one thing to be able to tell people, like, here's a list of things to do. If you do 1, 2, and 3, which I have in the book, do A, B, and C, you can build better teams. You can connect better or easier with people. But I also found that people learn through stories. They learn through hearing what other organizations have done, what other people have done. So because of that, I focused on half the book includes a lot of stories about how other people struggled and overcame and built great teams and connected with people.
Absolutely. Thank you so, so much for that, Barry. Now, we're going to get right into it, okay? What is connection and why why should it matter to leaders? Because when we look at connection, really, what we do, be it in the workplace, be it in the family unit, in any form of interaction with people, we're connecting. But then it's an area, like I said, that a lot of people struggle at. So, for leaders, what exactly is connection and why should they even bother to care about it?
Well, it's possible to succeed, to be successful in life, and successful means, you know, earning an income. It means, contributing to society. It's possible to do that by sitting in a room alone and not interacting with anyone. It's not likely, but it's possible that you could not have any communication with anyone else and still be successful. But that's not really the most likely scenario for success. Um, Not just for leaders, but for everyone to be able to interact and communicate with other people and understand what their needs are, uh, being able to communicate what your needs are and or the needs of a community, of an organization. Doing that, interacting with people, is really the key to getting things done in society. We call that success. I'm not really sure how to define success. It's not just money. It may be contributing to a community. It may be involved in something that's not for profit. But the point is that if we really want to get things done, the most important thing that we can do is focus on our interactions with other people and have positive interactions. So that's the goal of what I was trying to accomplish in my book, is to talk about how do you quickly do that so that you can get to a solution faster.
I see. And you clearly did that in the book. Now, when we talk about connection, and I want us to bring it to the workplace now, right? Especially looking at it from the standpoint of leadership. Now, when we look at connection in the workplace, a lot of focus seems to be on how the leader is able to connect with their constituents, right? Should connection really be a one-way street? And if it's not, how are we able to ensure that there's that level of balance? Or perhaps the question should be that how do we ensure that it becomes a two-way street where not just the leader is trying to build connection with their constituents, but the constituents are also trying to build connection with their leaders?
This is a great question, and it really goes to the core of what I talk about in the book. And that is, it's really important for people to share stories. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and I want to know some things about you. And that is sort of rule number one, is sharing stories about each other. Okay. The second part of that, and we'll talk about how to do that in a second, but the second part is talking about the same amount of time, talking equally. And that's, for somebody who likes to talk a lot, like me, maybe like you, we're talkers, and sometimes we just have a lot of things to say. And I personally have to slow myself down. I sort of like have to zip up my mouth, and I do certain things to shut my mouth. I have to say, uh, hmm, interesting. Tell me more. I have to actually tell myself in my head, use those phrases so I don't just jump back into the conversation and tell another story, that I actually want to draw more information out of you and be curious. I want to know about you, and the more I know about you, the more I like you, and then the more we want to work together. So talking about the same amount of time is really key. And if you're a talker, then you have to like chill yourself down. If you're not a talker, you have to sort of like amp yourself up a little bit to tell a few stories about things that are going on in your life. And the third sort of rule that I've come up with is, I call this assume positive intent. Assume positive intent. And what that means is we sometimes think people are out to get us. Like, oh, that person, they want something from me. We're all in our own worlds. We are the center of our own universe. I'm the center of my universe. You're the center of your universe. Our listeners we're all the same. We're walking around and the world is revolving around us. Okay. People are not out to get us. They actually want the best for us. So we have to think that people are not out to get us, and assume that people have good intentions. So when we're engaging in a conversation, that it's going to be a positive conversation. So share stories, talk about the same amount of time, and assume that your interactions are going to be good and positive.
Really critical areas that you have shared, Barry. And I read that in the book. And one question that kept popping up in my mind, what going through, because in the book you spoke about the encounter that you had with a driver, and then the part of that you actually spoke about the place of personal responsibility, right? On this journey of having the positive intent, there's actually the place of taking responsibility and ownership for your feelings, for your expression, and how you react or respond to situations. Now, looking at it from the standpoint of a leader in the workplace, right? Um, how exactly does a leader, or how exactly should a leader come across in terms of taking responsibility for their actions, taking responsibility for their inactions? So say for example, you have a difficult constituent or a difficult employee. How exactly are you able to communicate with that person, but from the standpoint of taking responsibility? How much of that interaction or building connection with this individual is the leader's responsibility, and how much of it is the responsibility of the other person on the other side?
Well, great question. And because we come across people who, from time to time, are not as cooperative, or may not be understanding those sort of three rules. They may not be assuming positive intent. They don't necessarily trust. I think that it's really important for a leader to be consistent and persistent. Try really hard, continuously make the effort to connect with other people. What I found in my life, I've been a CEO for 26 years, and I have found that persistence pays off. You just keep being positive, keep making the effort, and even when somebody is not communicating well, and we'll talk about this specifically, that if you are the one who takes responsibility for the communication, then you will eventually be able to get to them. Sometimes it takes longer, but you'll be able to eventually do it. And what I mean by that is, so let's say you're in a meeting and somebody is being disagreeable. They're disagreeing with many things that are being said. What's important to do, and I mean, we could identify a variety of situations, but what's important to do is to say to that person, well, you're disagreeing. Well, tell us why. Why do you disagree? And as opposed to just saying I disagree, well, tell us. Be more specific. You know, give them the opportunity to say what they need to say, and then let's address those things. Are those issues that are valid, or are they issues that are not valid? The most important thing, though, is to get them to get it all out. Make sure that they feel as though they've been heard, because if they just say, I disagree, and then we just push them aside and say, okay, well, we're going to do this anyway, well, then that person is just even more angry. So what we want to do is allow them to be heard, allow them to say what they want to say. And then I've been in situations where people have been very angry for a variety of reasons. This doesn't happen too often, but I've been in situations where people have been very angry. And while they're angry, I write down what they're saying. And I'm writing down, like, I think number one is this. I think number two is this. I think number three is this. And then I ask them to keep going, tell me more about that. And then when it seems like they're done, I say, are you done? And they say, yeah, I'm done. Like, okay, well, I think you said A, B, C, and D. Does that sound about right? And they say, yeah, that's it. Okay, well, let's address those. And then sort of walk through them. And not to sort of punch back and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's just like, well, now I know your concerns. Let's talk about your concerns and how we can address them. So what's important is for people in those difficult situations, one, to be heard, and then two, to very carefully address their concerns. It's always tough. I will say this, because they can be emotional situations. Somebody says something emotionally, and then we want to lash back at them emotionally as well. And it's important to keep the emotions low, so at least from your perspective, so that you can address their concerns. It can be tough. I can tell you something else that I do in the workplace in a positive situation. So, for example, we have a staff of 8 in our office, and we have short staff meetings twice a week. So we used to do those meetings in person, and now we do those meetings, on on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever we're using, for our video chats. And we always talk at the beginning of our meetings about something that is going on sort of in the world, or maybe in one of our the lives of some of our people. And so, for example, I'm in California right now, and we're experiencing some wildfires in the area, and the air is a little bit the air quality is a little bit worse than normal. But some people live closer to the fires, and their air is worse. So we talk. We say, Matt, how's the air around your house? Or how far away are the fires? And Matt tells us what it's like to live 20 miles away, or 30 or 40 kilometers away from the fires, and being concerned about that, being close enough, or where I may be 100 kilometers or 150 kilometers away. So we've talked about that. Some of our staff people have had sicknesses. Some of their families have had sicknesses. And to the extent that they have wanted to share, they have talked about that, and other people have sort of given them a hug and talked about difficult experiences that they've had and how they've gotten through it. So spending a little time talking about what's going on in each other's lives, even if it's just like, how was the sports game that your kid did this weekend, or where did you go on your last vacation? Those kind of things, they get people talking, and we share information about each other, share stories about each other, get to know each other better, and then like each other. And then when it comes to doing the work, we're happy to do the work for each other because we like each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. Now, Barry, I absolutely agree with you, right? But there's a concern for some leaders where they are worried about where exactly do they draw the line between sharing stories and making people feel so comfortable around them and not doing any of that. Because for some, they feel it could get to the point of, the constituent being intrusive or them being knowing too much. So where exactly do people draw the line in the workplace between trying to tell personal stories and making people feel that sense of belonging where they can open up with each other and then they can get to work together, become more productive? Where exactly do they draw the line, or is there even any line to draw in the first place?
So as a leader, you want to initiate this conversation. The conversation doesn't have to be personal. It can be at a much thinner level. So, for example, I call these icebreakers, and at the beginning of a meeting, you can have a topic where everybody talks about something, but it's a very light level. So, for example, uh, what is anybody listening to any podcasts that they would like to share? And they we go around the room, and people have 10 seconds, and they talk about the one or two podcasts. They don't give a long explanation. They just say, this podcast is about this and this one is about that. And we all share, and we might get some ideas about the kinds of podcasts we might listen to. Or maybe anybody heard any new music that they want to share, or people are streaming TV shows like Netflix. Anybody watching a Netflix show? And again, just give us the name of the show. It's an action show. Oh, great. And then you go around the room. So you don't have to share personal information about what's going on with your family. You can just talk about the very high level, basics about some interest. And then here's the goal is later on, if somebody says, oh yeah, I'm watching Ted Lasso on Apple TV, which is a show that my wife and I are watching. Okay. Somebody later on in the day can say, Barry, you mentioned Ted Lasso, and I've heard about that show. Tell me more about that. What's the show like? Or are they 30-minute shows? Are they 60-minute? Just is it a comedy? Is it a drama? Is there action? Tell me more about that show. And then we get to have a conversation about that show, and we share ideas about our interests. And then maybe I'd say, what kind of shows are you interested in? And again, it builds a bridge. The goal of those icebreakers is just to start that conversation so that later on we can have a bigger conversation.
Absolutely amazing. So, from what you have said, Barry, it means that a lot of the responsibility lies, with the leaders, right, to initiate those conversations, to drive connection with the people they need, so that it actually does impact the environment, it positively impacts the culture, and then there's greater performance and productivity in the workplace, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
And yeah, it's the now if you're a leader, if you're running the meeting, if you're in charge of the meeting, yes, it's your responsibility. If you're not doing that, you still have a responsibility to talk to the person who's facilitating the meeting or running the meeting or leading the meeting, and doing it quietly, one-on-one, and saying, hey, I think this might be something we could try to help us get to know each other a little bit better. Can we try that? So you can plant the seed and hope that the leader says, well, yeah, we can try that. Or maybe they'll say, why don't you try that? I'll turn it over to you at the beginning. You can lead that part of the meeting, and then we'll do that for 5 minutes, and then we'll get into, the agenda. So that even if you're not the leader or the facilitator, you can still suggest it. And at my website, barrymoline.com/resources, at the very top of that page, you can click on and get a handout that I've created, which has about 35 of these workplace icebreakers. So they're not too personal. They're kind of high level, but there are some ideas that can help spark conversation among a group for people just to get to know each other a little bit better. And it's a great place to start if you want to initiate some icebreakers.
I absolutely agree with you. So, I have copies of the icebreakers, and they're really, really great. So yeah, guys, go to Barry's website so that you can get to just, because sometimes we overcomplicate some of these things, and then sometimes we oversimplify them. But then it's important that we have real examples, sort of a template to work with that just makes the journey a whole lot easier for us, and then we're able to build that level of competence around these areas. Now, Barry, let's talk about the place of connection in terms of connecting with different people. Now, in the workplace, or let's even look at leadership as a whole. So the different type of people, right, with different personalities, different ideologies. How are leaders able to connect across? In such a way that they're able to get the very best of each interaction, each relationship, be it in the workplace or with other stakeholders that they have to engage with. How exactly do they get to balance all this difference in personality, or, I just put in that diversity? How do they deal with it and then get the best, out of all those relationships?
Well, I work in part of the time that I work in the world of advocacy, and that is the world of politics. And in politics, there are people on both sides, and you're always talking to people that they may disagree with each other, but one day you're talking with one person, and the next day you're talking with another person, and you may not be. Your issue may be something that's in the center, but you've got to convince people on either side to want to do your thing. So you have to be able to talk to people on either side, who have very strong opinions about politics on the left or right, but those aren't your issues. So what's important to do is in any kind of situation where you're not sure if you might, agree or disagree. And of course, you can have these kinds of situations in families where people, come at politics from different places. What's important to do is to commit to listening more. And this is an interesting, it's not a trick, a technique. You listen, and then you try to find something that you can agree on. So, even whatever topic they're talking about, these days, COVID is a big issue around the planet, and how to address COVID or minimize the transfer of COVID. And there's questions about vaccines, and should people get the vaccine or not. Some people are afraid of it, and so on. And when I talk to somebody who might disagree with me about the vaccine, for example, what I do is I listen to them, and I just try to understand what's going on, what their situation is. as opposed to saying, you ought to do this and you ought to do that. I say, well, that's interesting. Tell me more. Why do you believe that? Whatever position it is. And that way we get to have a conversation. Now, I'm the one who is trying to keep this conversation balanced. And I'm the one who's not going to get into a fight with somebody. I'm going to make sure that's not going to happen. And even if they say something that's a little bit, I don't know, tense or offensive, I might just say like, wow, that's a pretty strong statement. That's, let's be careful about that. That's pretty strong. I can see you believe this very, very clearly, or you're very passionate about it. So rather than just fight them back, is just recognize, oh, wow, yeah, you feel strongly about that, or that's interesting, tell me more. So the idea is just to do the best you can. Sometimes I have to bite my tongue, to not, fight somebody back. And then, of course, sometimes it's okay to disagree a little bit and have a spirited conversation, trying to focus on the facts as opposed to the emotions. Nevertheless, it's important for one person, just one person, you, to take that responsibility. The other person may not know that they're, what you're doing to try to make sure the conversation stays civil. Because otherwise, what's the alternative is you're yelling at each other and disagreeing or calling each other names. So that's not a productive conversation. So if you can keep it civil, then you can stay in the conversation and have a productive conversation.
Absolutely agree. The place of responsibility we cannot undermine. Thank you for that. There's something you speak about in Connect where you say kill them with kindness, right? And I would like us to talk about that just a little bit. Just trying to understand this whole concept of connection. Because so look at the model, for example, the dozen model for leadership that I developed. That quite a couple of elements, and some of those elements which are key, for example, to communication, to connection is communication, for example, right? And I know that when it comes to communicating with people, it goes beyond what we say, right? There's a place of the non-verbal communication and then verbal communication. There's quite a lot of other components and elements to consider. Now, when you say kill them with kindness, the people who will not verbalize their grievance, for example, but then, their non-verbal expression or their non-verbal cues tell you totally different. Now, how exactly are people able to kill people with kindness when they feel aggrieved or then, they feel upset about something? How exactly do we find this balance, especially for leaders who, haven't gotten to that place of self-awareness or personal responsibility or are still struggling to even understand this entire concept of emotional intelligence?
Well, first, let's recognize it's hard. It's not easy to do, to be nice or to approach difficult interactions, emotional interactions. It's difficult to approach them in a positive way or in a friendly way or in a kind way. And by killing somebody with kindness, what we mean is even when somebody's angry, it's still, you don't get angry back. You just continue to try to stay friendly and do everything in your power to to not engage in an angry way. So that's what that means. And what happens is two things. One is that they can't complain about you that you were angry. They can never say, oh, Barry was a jerk. They just can't. They just can't say that. They can all just say, well, I had an interaction and, they may not agree that you were kind, but they would say, well, he was okay. So if they're angry, they will not be able to pin that on you, and you won't have helped to elevate or make the situation worse. So so that's number one. And then number two is you never know. You never know in an interaction when you might be able to find an opening where the two of you can agree. And it almost always pays off to be the one word is amiable, but to be friendly, in a situation, because you never know where you might find something in common where you can say, oh, we both like football. Hey, let's talk about football for a little bit. And then maybe we can go back to this other issue and we can talk about it in a friendlier way. So it's always better to do that. Now, sometimes there's no question something bad has happened, or maybe there's an emergency, something's on fire, or there's just, you have to act and you just have to bark orders and get things done. Well, that's an emergency. Something has to happen, so let it all out. But the rest of the time you can get a lot farther with a solution, a lot closer to a solution, if you're friendly and if you're amiable with people.
Great. So friendly and amiable people. Now, so there's a question, and the question is that how can people sustain a conversation when two of them are not agreeing, right? And I know you've touched on it a little bit. So is there any other thing that they can do, as leaders to ensure that they're able to sustain conversations or sustain relationships even when they're not agreeing?
Yeah, the number one thing that I do when I think that I might be entering into a conversation with someone who disagrees with me is I come into the conversation thinking, I am going to learn everything I possibly can about you or about this situation before I respond. And we talked a little bit about this. No matter what the issue is, if I come in and say, hey, I want to talk about, in my world, I talk about energy a lot, but nevertheless, we want to talk about, whatever issue might be out there, tell me what you think about that. And then they'll tell you, and then you can ask more questions and even more and more, and try to get every possible, concern or issue on the table so that you fully understand their situation. Because you might find that solving their problem or coming to an agreement might be easier. So take, for example, this one simple concept here. Let's say you have a neighbor, and you want to put up a fence to that neighbor, between your house and that neighbor's house. So you have to talk to the neighbor about where the fence is going to go, and just make sure that they understand that. Well, the neighbor might say, I want to make sure that the fence looks good on my side. And my concern is that I want the fence to be high enough where you can't see into my yard. I don't care what the fence looks like on my side, whether it's pretty or ugly. I just want there to be a fence, and I want it to be high. So the neighbor might say, well, I don't care how high the fence is. I just want it to look good. Well, right there, as instead of having some friction about the fence, you talk and you say, oh, well, I can make the fence look pretty on your side, and then you're okay with the fence being, high? Like, yeah, that's fine. Well, then there's no friction anymore. Whereas maybe originally when I proposed the idea of building a fence, the neighbor might say, well, it's going to be an ugly fence. I'm going to oppose the fence. So if you talk about what their needs are, what their issues and concerns are, you find out, oh, well, that's easy for me to do. I can, no problem, as long as you agree the fence can be this height, we got a deal. So that's why it's so important to talk to others, not just to, there's a sort of a concept in negotiation and conversation, which is let the other person go first, ask them questions, and then they tell you stuff. And boy, you can learn an awful lot in a conversation about someone else's concerns and ideas if they talk first. And then you can address their concerns, and you can say, and then here are some of my issues. Are you okay with that? But by them talking, they get it off their chest. You can address their concerns, and also you can find maybe just a couple of things that you might disagree on, and you can say, how can we address those? Well, we agree on 9 out of 10 things here, so that's great. Let's work on this one thing that maybe we disagree on. So letting someone else tell you their concerns first is a great way to get a conversation going, or maybe sometimes a difficult conversation going, and then seeing where you have a lot of bridges, where we can agree on, and then maybe just a couple of things that you need to resolve separately.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Barry. And I hear a lot of personal responsibility in that you have said. I hear a lot of the fact that we have to do a lot of more listening, and there has to be the positive mindset. And just like you mentioned earlier, that no one is after you, right? So you have to get into conversations, get into relationships, having that positive mindset, having the positive outlook, not like somebody's coming after you or somebody out there to just ensure that you don't succeed and all of that. So also for leaders, it's important that leaders go into interactions with their constituents with this positive mindset, because I know that mindset plays a huge role in how we're able to build relationships, how we're able to sustain connections and all of that. But just even talking about sustaining connection, I'd like you to talk about some tips, right, that can help people sustain connection. Because first, there's the place of even making the connection, right? So whether you're making connection with an employee or a constituent, with a spouse, with a stakeholder at work, a supplier, or whoever it is, there's a place of the first interaction where you can make the connection. But just off your head, 2 or 3 tips that people can deploy to sustain conversations, sustain connection, and ensure that they're able to get the very best out of relationships, where they can collaborate and win together.
So let me give you 2. One is I love this technique, which is when I go to a party or a new work environment and I don't know somebody and I'm talking to them, I'll ask them, what's got their attention lately? What's got your attention these days? And everybody's got something going on, whether it's work, whether it's personal. There's something going on right now in front of them. They've got a to-do list, and there's something on that to-do list. And so there's what's got your attention these days is a great, very generic conversation starter. And it works for people at all levels. It works for children. If you're talking to a child, what are you doing these days? What's got your attention these days? If you're talking to somebody in the world of work, they've got, a list of things at work that they're doing. If you're talking to somebody who's no longer working, who's retired, what's got your attention? Oh, well, I'm spending time with my grandchildren, and you can talk about that. What's got your attention these days? A great question. And I use it all the time. It's just kind of fun. The second one is, once you have a relationship with somebody, even a slight relationship at work, and you want to maintain or grow that relationship, is listen. I know we talked about listening, but this is listening in a different way. Listen to their emotions, listen to their voice. Is anything troubling them? Can you hear, concerns? If you want to take a relationship to a little deeper level, listen to maybe if they're being hesitant for some reason. The other day, I was talking to a colleague. He was a work colleague, and we were talking about some difficult issues that he was facing in work, and some, I wouldn't necessarily call them conflicts, but let's just say for the sake of conversation, it was some conflicts and some difficult work related issues. And he was in the middle of them and trying to figure out how best to resolve it. I had nothing to do with it. So I was just, chatting with him and listening to him. But I could hear there was distress in his voice and a little bit of hesitancy. And I don't know, he just wasn't his happy self. And we finished talking about it. And I said, so how's Mike doing? How are you doing, Mike? Because it sounded like he wasn't doing that well. He sounded like he had some things he wanted to get off his chest. And he said, I'm frustrated. I wish this would go away. And he just needed to say that. He just needed to say a few things to get it out that maybe he couldn't tell anybody else. And it was short, but it showed that we were developing a deeper connection. I mean, I really do care about him, and I want him to be successful, but it helped our relationship even better, because next time, if I'm the one that's having a tough time, he might hear that in my voice and he might say, tell me how you're doing, Barry. Are you okay with this? Because you'll get through it. And it's nice to be able to have somebody, a friend, that you can tell, your some of the things that you wouldn't say, to everybody during the day. You might just say them to one person, or to your spouse, or, to a very close friend. So it's important to listen and to what we call, being emotionally intelligent, being intelligent about their emotions and picking up on that, and then asking. You don't have to say, well, it sounds like you're really sad. You just need to say, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? It sounds like this is a tough time. I'm here if you want to talk about it. And people will tell you, if they, what they're really feeling. They'll appreciate that.
I agree with you, Barry. That's really profound. And, you've beautifully capped it up with emotional intelligence. And that's our ability to listen to what is even unsaid, right? And one doesn't have to come tell you, oh, I'm not feeling well today. You can see sometimes. So just take that extra step to ask, how are you doing today? And come from that place of genuine care and concern. And that definitely helps strengthen relationships. For me, I think that relationships shouldn't be parasitic. They shouldn't be. It's a two-way street where you're giving and the other person is giving, where you care about this other person and the person can visibly see that you care about them. Barry, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation with you. I absolutely love reading Connect. And before you go, you've shared a lot of great tips and insight. I would like you to share with us how we can get Connect, your book, and also where we can find you online.
So Connect is available on Amazon, and it's Connect exclamation point, right? Oh, we have it. We have it in stereo. Connect exclamation point. It won an award. That's why mine has a little sticker here. Connect. And you have to put in Connect and then my name at the bottom. Connect Barry Moline, and then it pops right up. So that's where it's available. It also, if you go to my website, barrymoline.com, you can, there's a portion of the book there that you can click on and get connected to Amazon. And then, as I said, to barrymoline.com/resources, you can get that 30 workplace icebreakers. And I also love to talk about these kinds of issues. So you can get my email address on the website. If people have questions about a situation, I love to talk about them. I love to email about them. I also have a blog. So, I'm always talking about these issues and new issues. And I just made a list actually of future blog items, and it's something like 70 blogs, ideas long. And the person that I work with on writing blogs said, like, holy moly, I thought you were gonna say, have 20 of them, and you came up with 70. Like, this is gonna keep us busy for years. So uh, so I have a lot of ideas about, how people can get along better in the workplace, how to build confidence, how to give presentations, just all the things that I've learned from decades in the workplace and being a CEO for a long time. I want to share those with others with no strings attached. I just want people to be successful. So, I'm happy to stay in touch with everyone and to talk to folks if they want to.
Thank you so much for that, Barry. It's been great conversation with you, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank
Great. Thank
you.
you, Kemi. Thank you.
All right. So, guys, it's been great and phenomenal chat with Barry Moline. He shared a lot of great insights and tips. You want to take all those insights and run with them. I always say that insights without actions will always be useless. So, make sure you go through this message again over and over, take note of the great insights, and then let the rubber hit the road. All right. So, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Till I come your way again, have a lovely day and see you again.